In this week's episode, we talk about funding your next staff member, getting rid of the poverty mindset, and putting on a garment of praise. Hey, and welcome to episode 40 of Business Greenhouse TV. Just back from the Gold Coast, we had our year 2 group up there for a couple of days. We went deep into Google AdWords, Facebook marketing, 90-day planning, which was excellent. Nothing but hustle for 2 whole days in the classroom. In the office today, and then this afternoon heading down to Sydney to spend the rest of the week with our Sydney year 1 group, where we're basically doing the same. We'll spend 3 whole days working on the business, rolling up our sleeves, looking at how to position their business in the market so that the market really, really want it. So we're going to spend 3 whole days on that and a few other things. So super busy month for us. I'm so glad to be back in the saddle doing these. This is the second one back in this season, and I'm really enjoying it. And today we've got some super solid questions. So without further ado, let's get into the show.
How do I make the transition to justify employing staff to grow?
Scott Lawton, let me first give you a shout out. Pest control business in Rockhampton. I took this question. I get asked it all the time. It's like, how do you juggle that transition? I'm too busy for 1. I'm not busy enough for 2 or something like that. And so I don't have the cash flow to make 2 and so forth. It's probably the number 1 question I get asked at every event, every seminar, every keynote, every Q&A, and so that's why I keep having to address it. Scott, I want to be the merchant of truth. Okay, there's plenty of books out there that will tell you it's all easy. You've only got to work 4 hours a week and you'll be a millionaire, and you can start a business, and then from there on you're gonna spend the rest of your time at the beach, and it's absolute rubbish. I personally think that the biggest challenge in business, the hardest stage, the biggest pinch point, is to go from 1 to 2 people or 2 to 3. That really early stage is the hardest point. In fact, it's harder to go from single operator to 1 or 2 staff than it is to go from 100 staff to 200 staff. So you're right to ask the question. It's the toughest stage. But I also want to tell you, it's not going to be pretty. But this is a little bit about how it has to work if you want to go through. See, that's the reason why most people don't. They get to this pinch point, the pain of the process pushes them back to just staying with whatever's mediocre. They just want to stay where they are. Let me tell you how it works. Okay, so you're going along right now. You're probably earning good money. Okay, but you're a single operator. You're probably 70 hours a week plus invoicing. So you're up to the eyeballs, but you're making more than you would if you ever went and worked in a job. Well, if you're going to put on a staff member, there's one of 2 options. Raise capital, okay, to pay for them, which means you can keep your cash flow, or you have to use your cash flow. There's no genie in a bottle that you can rub to solve this situation. You've either got to go and get a loan or access some capital from somewhere and fund the next lot of wages, or if you can't do that or you don't want to do that, then you have to fund it out of cash flow. Let's say you're going to fund it out of cash flow. Well, let me be totally honest with you. That money comes from you. It has to. So you're cruising along, everyone's doing big hours, they're making good money. They usually have some lifestyle choices that they could go without. If you want to allocate, so you've got to give away your wages to the next person. There's no other way around it, which means that your living expenses have to come right down. So the way that you go from 1 person to 2 is you've basically got to take your life back to being creative with 2-minute noodles. If you can take your life back down to live on the bare minimum, you can afford to pay this person your wages, okay? And you're probably going to have to do that and every business and industry would be different, but you might have to do that for a month before that person is actually producing you more money than they're costing. For some businesses, it's 3 days, and some businesses, 3 months, somewhere in there, but you're going to have to pay that person out of your own wages. So now you've got less money and you're basically paying them to come to work, okay? That pressure, the fact that that's not comfortable needs to drive you to go back to marketing. So you go back to marketing, which means probably now you're working even more hours for a bit because you've got to be on the tools and now you've got to go and do marketing, okay? You go back to do marketing. You make sure that you ramp up the front end. Now what happens is they're busy because you gave them your work and you're busy again. So two of you are busy. Effectively, all you've done is now, you've got another mouth to feed, but it's not costing you because you gave them your wages, the marketing kicks in, you then fill yourself up again, okay? So now two of you are running. But that's not a business, okay? So we've got to keep going. Then you're going to employ a third person, okay? The first person you put on, they've got to stay. Now you've got to go back to the same process. You've got to go back to living off 2-minute noodles, and you can be creative. You can add corn one day and you can add a little bit of tin chicken the other, but you've got to go back to 2-minute noodles and you've got to give your wages to the third person, okay? Then that pressure needs to push you to marketing to get the front end up, more AdWords, more Facebook, more referrals, so that 3 of you are now full. Okay? Now, at the point where 3 of you are full, the 4th person in doesn't require you to give away all of your income because you can take a little bit from person 1, a little bit from person 2 and 3, and pay person 4. And that's how it gets easier over time. Okay? But there's a couple of traps to this. Firstly, people won't look at their expenses and live off beans and rice and give that person the money because of something about I deserve it or I'm a businessman or something like that, okay, which is crazy. The only way to get it to work is that way. So it can fall over there. The second place this falls over is when we put on that second person and we give them our wages, the pressure doesn't drive us to go and do marketing. It drives us to go and have a soul can sit in a corner and then nothing happens, nothing grows. The minute you put somebody on, you've got to then go and do marketing to match. Then when that person's on and you're running, you put the next person on and you've got to go back to marketing, okay? So you're basically building a funnel, marketing at the front and management at the back, staff and capacity at the back. And you've always got to be jumping between those two. You can imagine, fast forward to your 6th or your 7th hire, you can fund that out of cash flow because you're making, 30% off the other 5 staff every week. Between what you're charging them out at, what you're paying them minus some business expenses, you're taking 30% off those. That money can then go and go and go, and it gets much, much easier. So Scott, in short, you've just got to do it. You've just got to pin back every bit of money that you spend and give them your wages for a while until they're up to speed, and then go and do your marketing. Great question.
How do you move past the poverty/guilt mindset to be successful? Other than awesome lessons in supernatural business?
Luke, that's a great question. It's a real trap, this poverty, playing small mindset that has crept in. As believers, where has this come from? There was certainly a teaching that crept into the church that, to have less is more spiritual and things like that. And that's fine. There are people that are called to live with nothing. There is a grace on people who are called to live with very, very little. And God's able to manifest in those situations. And that's excellent. I'm in awe of that. But there's also a grace for people to handle large amounts of money and use that for the kingdom as well. There's a grace there as well. One is not right. The problem is, like you, Luke, when you're a business person and you're hanging on to that stuff from the past, that's a recipe for disaster. The only way that I know of to get past it, because I certainly, I wasn't born with everyone's just going to make millions, we're going to fund the kingdom. I wasn't born like that. I was certainly born with, money's hard to come by, it doesn't grow on trees, it makes the world go round, it's slightly evil. So I, had that, chatter too when I was young, but I had to go and undo it. The only antidote that I know of to get rid of that is to tackle it with a spirit of generosity, is to actually start to get the money out of your hands, okay? Not because of the bad theology that means the Lord's going to all of a sudden bless you and we're somehow bribing him into our future revenue. Not because of that. Because of what it does to us up here. When we start to give it away or make good investments, like, we are going to put on a staff member, or we are going to fund a charity, or we are going to do some major marketing. When we start to let go of it freely, it trains our mind that there's more coming, so it's going to be okay. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's not going to be one of those things where all of a sudden you wake up and you're going to tear it apart. I'm not sure how old you are, but let's say I probably caught this when I was, 27 7, something like that. It's like I had 27 years of bad programming to undo. It's not going to happen in a second. It took years of me being intentional about being generous and getting rid of those old belief systems for me to actually start to fully believe it. And Luke, as a testimony, I sit here today expecting that lots and lots of money is going to flow into my business because there are $13 trillion being traded around the world any second. You've only got to stick your hands out now and some money will stick. I firmly believe that there's way more than I will ever need out there. And so I'm able to bring some in, use it wisely, feed my family, have some nice things and fund projects, expecting there's more. Nothing actually changed in the marketplace. It all changed up here. There's always been enough. There's way more than you will ever need. The Lord doesn't work in pies where he has to divide out the pie between all his believers. There's more than that. If the Lord wants more, he just makes more pies. There's more than enough out there for you, but it's not going to happen by me telling you. I believe it only happens when we start to put on that spirit of generosity and we start to view money as coming in and going out, coming in and going out and putting it wherever you want. It can be in your business, out of your business, to your family, supporting a charity, funding your church, it can be whatever it is. But starting to view money coming in and going out and being okay with that and letting the figures that come in and out get bigger and bigger and bigger over time is the only way I know how to deal with carrying that poverty mindset. Let me put it to you this way. The Bible says a house divided cannot stand. You cannot go and build a fantastic business, heaps of staff, heaps of influence, heaps of finance to fund projects and still hang on to that from years gone by. The two are incompatible. You have to start. First thing I'll do is take this to the Lord and say, Lord, where did that come from? When did I start believing it? And what do I do about it? And I'm going to start being intentionally generous to combat it, to rewire my brain so that I don't carry that rubbish anymore. Great question. Let's go to Word of the Week. This week, we are going Old Testament. We're going prophet. We're going to go to Isaiah 61:3. We spend a lot of time in Proverbs because they just lend themselves to business, and a lot of that New Testament teaching is very motivational. So we go there, but and if you go back and look at some of the older episodes, you'll see a lot of early New Testament, probably the first 5 books, because there's a lot in there about how we are to conduct ourselves. So I just wanted to pick something really random this time, something that's kind of like in the middle where we've never been before. So Isaiah 61:3 says this, and we've got the digital Bible today. To appoint unto them that mourn in Zion, to give unto them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, and this is the one I want to pick up on, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. You ever had that moment? That day, that week in business where you just feel heavy, you're frustrated, you feel like you're spinning your wheels, nothing seems to be working. I have a rule within my life and with our crew that you're allowed to have a bad 5 minutes. You're not allowed to have a bad day. You can't waste an entire day being bad. But, we live in an environment that's fairly upbeat, so you don't really have a choice here. But, not everyone's had that training. So sometimes, it's just hard. And so, Isaiah is saying in that moment, when you have that spirit of heaviness, the best antidote is a garment of praise, okay? Is to hold the Lord up and start praising him for what you do have, for the gifts he's given you, for the untapped potential you've never tapped into, for the goodness that's just around the corner, for your future generation. Like, you can be grateful for an awful lot and start to praise him on those things. What it does when we start to praise him is it gives a perspective to just how insignificant our issue is. When we start to, press in and start to really, lift up the name of the Lord in our own life, what happens is the magnitude of our awe on him makes our circumstances feel really small, which is really good. It's not that they go away, but we do need to keep them in check. On our team, we have the creator of the universe who has a lot of ideas on how to get rid of problems and challenges. So just put on that garment of praise. When you're having a bad 5 minutes, what I do, I'll crank up a bit of Bethel or a bit of music like that, and I will just belt it out. And you know what? it just changes us. Because as a Christian, our state is everything. What happens in here, our state means so much to our productivity and to our walk. You know, I meet so many people that are in a disempowered state. You know, it's downhill, downhill, downhill. This is bad, that went wrong, this didn't go. And what happens is the human brain does evidence gathering. So if you make your mind up that it's hard right now, you will go about finding everything to back up that rubbish thought that it's hard right now. The problem is the good news is if you start to think that it's great out there and actually the economy's booming and my industry's excellent, then what happens is the brain starts to evidence gather that that is true as well. And it starts to find all the good reports, all the win stories, all the exciting things, the great conversations, and you start to believe that stuff more and more. And there's a very thin knife edge between an empowered state and a disempowered state, okay? The way that you shift your focus is you put on that garment of praise and you lift his name up and you start to focus on him and you press right in to the point where everything falls away and you can see clearly again. And then you start to train your brain to find the good things in life, and that will propel you forward and get you out of that spirit of heaviness. Solid episode. Hope you enjoyed that. I'll be back next week in my one day between cities to get another episode out to you. I'd love your comments in the section below. I'll see you next week. Bye for now.